This is what I do today. I'll try it without a microphone until the ICT person is coming. Last week we looked at parsing the predicator, how to label the different verbs in the predicator. We'll finish that today, and then we'll talk about two more functions: the subject attribute and the direct object. Okay, so last week I told you every sentence consists of a subject and a predicator. Don't call a predicator a predator on the test, by the way. It may look like a predator because it's so complicated. But it's not.
So no funny points?
Right. The subject and the predicator. Right, every sentence consists of a subject and a predicator. So two examples: Jack eats frogs. Jack is the subject. We said the subject tells you what the sentence is about. It's the main topic of the sentence, and eats is the predicator. It describes the action that Jack is doing. These man-eating frogs form a potential danger. These man-eating frogs is the subject, because that's what the sentence is about. So, these man-eating frogs, how do you know that these three words, these man-eating frogs, belong together to form one subject? I said you should apply the substitution test. You can replace these three words with one word, they. Yeah, exactly. They form a potential danger. If you can replace them with one word, then it's one constituent, in this case, a subject. Right? Subject and predicator. The verb then, form, is a predicator. Then we said the predicator consists of different kinds of verbs. What you're doing if you're describing these verbs is you're parsing the predicator. Remember, parsing referred to labeling every individual word in a sentence. The predicator belongs to that too. So we say the predicator may contain a lexical verb. Lexical verbs have an obvious meaning. You can picture it, as it were, or they describe an action. That's what lexical verbs do. They describe a kind of action, and you can actually picture it. You can picture Jack eating. You can't really picture him thinking, but you know what I mean when I say thinking. Jack thinks frogs are a delicacy. Thinks is a lexical verb as well. Now these have an obvious meaning. The copular verb does not describe an action, but rather a state, an experience. Right? There's a difference between Jack eats and the teacher is. Eats is an obvious action, he does something. Is a state, he is. Yeah? It doesn't mean he does something. The same goes for remains. His identity remains a mystery. Yes?
But in the previous sentence, form, is that also a copular verb?
Yes. His identity remains a mystery. Remains is also a state, as it were. It's not an action when you remain, it's an experience, it's a state you're in. We said copular verbs can be replaced by a form of be, by an equal sign. You could say, his identity is a mystery. That's the same. Yeah? Whereas you can't say, Jack is frogs. Or maybe when if he eats enough, then maybe he becomes, I don't know. These lectures are turning grosser and grosser. Who knows who'll come in next week instead of me? You never know. Third type of verb is the auxiliary verb. This is also called a helping verb. It assists a lexical or a copular. Right? We said auxiliary verbs are there to help another verb. They don't appear on their own. They always come together with another verb. We have been wondering about his identity. Have and been are auxiliary verbs. They help the word wonder, wondering. They're there to assist the word wondering. Yeah, and you shouldn't worry about it. Should then is an auxiliary as well. It helps the word worry. Tim.
Could you describe the auxiliary verb as pretty much a leftover verb?
Leftover. Well, it's got an important function. So I wouldn't call it a leftover verb. It's just not as important as the main verb. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Also, as you can see on the slide, have and been are primary modals because they can occur. They can appear as lexical verbs as well, right? You can say we have a book. Yeah, and then have can stand on its own. It's no longer an auxiliary verb. It's a lexical verb. Same goes for be. Yeah, be. It can become a copula as well. So we have primary modals and primary auxiliaries and modal auxiliaries. Primary auxiliaries were do, be, and have. Do, behave. Remember. Right. All the others are modals. So lexical copula auxiliary. I'm not going to discuss this in any detail today because I did so last week. But are there any questions? Yes.
When parsing these, do you, with the modal ones, you have like the different kinds? Do you have to add them with it?
Yeah. No, with the modals you just say modal auxiliary.
So not modal preposition or whatever?
No.
Oh, okay.
Modal auxiliary. Yeah? So when you're parsing, when you're describing when you're labeling every individual word in a sentence, and you come across a predicator, you have to say, you can't just say this is a verb. You've got to say, this is a lexical verb, this is a copular verb, this is a modal auxiliary or a primary auxiliary.
Not finite, right?
You don't have to say whether they're finite or non-finite when it says pass, but there's one question on the test where you have to describe the entire predicator, and there you have to include every little detail. I would discuss that with David in the tutorial, because then he can practice that with you. Yeah. Then we talked about finite and non-finite. We said the first verb in the predicator is always finite. Now, if you're confused about what does finite mean, I said you can change the tense of the verb, then don't worry about it. You just remember the first verb is always finite. If it's the only verb, it's also finite. All the others are non-finite. Do I have examples? No. Jack is nice. Is the only verb in the sentence, so that's finite. You can change it. You can say Jack was nice. Jack is being nice. Then is finite. Jack was being nice. Being is non-finite. You can't change it. Any questions about finite and non-finite? I discussed it last week, but any? No. Okay. So let's start from here. We talked about finite verbs, and then last week I said there's different kinds of non-finite verbs. It's the last thing I need to say about the predicator. And then we stopped. We didn't get around to that. So that's what I'm going to discuss now. We have three kinds of non-finite verbs. Look at this sentence. Jack has been acting this way for too long now. Has been acting is the predicator. Has is obviously finite because it's the first one. You can say Jack had been acting. Yeah, it's the first verb in the predicator, so this one's finite. You can change it. You can change the tense. Been and acting are non-finite because they're not the first ones, and you can't change them. You can't say Jack was acting or something. You can't change anything with been. The same goes for acting. You can't change its form. So these two are non-finite. Then one kind of non-finite form is the present participle, or the ing participle. You can also call it the ing participle. Maybe that helps you remember it better. It always ends in ing. ing. The past participle is another kind of non-finite form, and that's in Dutch the voltooid deelwoord. Past participle. Some people call it the ed participle. You could call it the ed participle, but of course it doesn't always end in ed, right? The past participle. Like toe doesn't end in ed, or bin. It's a past participle, doesn't end in ed. So if you're not sure what the past participle is, it's always the third one in a list of irregular verbs that you had to learn at secondary school. To beat, beaten, become, became, become, grow, grew, grow, etc. Cut, cut, cut. The third one, that's the past participle. And the third kind of non-finite form is the to infinitive form. Jack likes to eat crazy things. He likes to eat is the that's not right. Sorry. Can I come up with another example? Okay, this is I made a mistake here. To eat is a non-finite form. It's to infinitive, but like is not an auxiliary verb. So to eat crazy things here is like is a predicator. So can I come up with another example? What do you think? I'll come up with an example later on. So,
Hi, sir. Do you have time somewhere today to...
well, I'm teaching now, so you're interrupting my...
when you are free, I have class, sorry.
Yeah.
Really?
You can't just come in and lecture when I'm lecturing to ask me a question. So if you want to come to me, come after class. Yeah? Send me an email. Yeah. Yes?
Yeah, last lesson with David, he also had finite forms in the present participle and stuff.
They had a variance in it.
No, present participle is never fine. Are you confused now?
He had a variance in it as well.
Oh yeah, to infinitive. Yeah. So I'm sorry about this. So non-finite forms, there's three different kinds of forms. The present participle and the past participle. And I realise now I put the wrong example, the three, because that could confuse you potentially. So I'll come back to this after the break. I just have to think of a new example. Yeah, but there's three different kinds in a predicator. If you have a non-finite form, it's either present participle or past participle, or to infinitive. The to infinitive form is not as doesn't occur as often as the present and past participle. That's why I can't come up with an example right now. Any questions about this? Yeah.
It should also be infinitive without to.
Yeah, it's a bare infinitive. Yeah, it's a bare infinitive. Yeah, but it doesn't occur as often in predicates. That's why I don't discuss it here. Yeah. Another question?
Do we ignore this example? Or can we...
Yeah, just ignore this example for now. I'll come back to this after the break when I come up with a good example. Yeah. I can't hear your question.
Could you explain the to infinitive form again?
Yes, the to infinitive form always starts with the word to and then the infinitive. Yeah, the woordenboek, dictionary form. Yeah. But again, don't copy this example because it might confuse you. Because like and to are two different predicators, and that's not for this course. It is the infinitive form. The to eat, yeah.
So I told him to go.
Yes, but that's the same. Then you have two different predicators. Yeah. So I have to think about it. Right. What I'd like you to do, as an exercise, is look at this sentence. Jack may have been cheating. First, this may look a bit confusing to you. I'll explain it to you. First, write down the functions for Jack and for may have been cheating. Then, write down the phrases for Jack and for may have been cheating. Then, I'd like you to write down what kind of verb this is. Is it lexical, copular, modal auxiliary, primary auxiliary. Then I'd like you to write down what form the verb has. Is it finite or non-finite? Then I'd like you to write down, is this present participle or past participle? Yeah? So Jack may have been cheating, functions, phrases, lexical copula, finite, non-finite, and present participle or past participle. Go ahead. In the meantime, I found out what I did wrong. So before we discuss this, I go back here and I'll change something about PowerPoint. I figured out what I did was I confused what you need to know for. Let me just. So I confused what you need to know for syntax 1 and syntax 2. Yeah, so I confused year 1 and year 2. So I shouldn't have called this a 2 infinitive, I should just call this an infinitive. And then, so there's 3 kinds of non-finite forms. Sometimes there's a present participle which ends in ing. Sometimes you have a past participle which is a past tense form, and an infinitive, which is a dictionary form. And the infinitive can have a to or no to. Yeah, so it can be a to with to, without to. In this case, Jack should not eat. Eat is the infinitive form here. Yeah, it's not past tense, it's the infinitive form. Before we find it in a dictionary. So there we go. That's where I got confused. It can get worse though. I once taught a phonetics 2, year 2 class on intonation, and it's one of my favorite subjects, so I should do really well. But then, anyway, maybe I was really tired or so, I got so confused, I just sent the group home. I said, I'll do it again next week. Jenna?
You said before that the 2 infinitive form always starts with 2.
Yeah, so that's what I said wrong. So Vicente is infinitive, and it can be either to infinitive or without to. Yeah? In this case, this is infinitive without to. You could also call this a bare infinitive. Yeah? Any other questions? Quinty?
But on the test you said just infinitive, not bare infinitive.
No, in the test you just say infinitive. Yeah. Okay, now let's discuss this. I'll show you the answers. There we go. Jack obviously is the subject. I hear a lot of background noise again. Jack obviously is the subject. It's also a noun phrase. Subject is always a noun phrase. Is it? Not always, but most of the time. May have been cheating is a very long predicator. And the predicator is always a verb phrase. Always.
But why is it called Jack may have been cheating? Because Jack did this.
But then, what's the main verb in may have in the predicator then? If the may have been is the predicator, then there's no main verb. And then the predicator only consists of auxiliary verbs, may, have, and been, and that's not possible. So cheating needs to be there as a lexical verb. So a predicator has to have either a lexical verb or a copular verb. In this case, that's cheating, so that should go into the predicator.
This one is difficult because of me.
Because of may. Why does may make this difficult? May is never a lexical verb.
No, I thought May was copula.
May is not a copula.
Yeah, I know it's wrong. But that's what made it difficult for me.
Okay, we'll come to a copula. Oh yeah, that's what we come to now. Okay, may is a modal auxiliary. It always is a modal auxiliary. It's never a copula, it's never a lexical verb. Because if it's a copula, you need to be able to replace it with a form of be. Well, in this case, you can't do that. And also, it comes at the beginning of a long predicator. Copulas and lexical verbs come at the end. Yeah? So may is always a modal auxiliary.
Any reason for that?
Any reason for, because that's just what it is. Any reason for you being a human? No, it's just what you are, right?
Sorry, wrong question.
Yes.
Always need to mention the modal primary.
Yeah.
Or else it's
Yeah. This is a modal auxiliary, have is a primary auxiliary, and been is a primary auxiliary. If you don't know, it's just think, does it belong to do, be, and have? Do, behave, then it's primary. If not, then it's modal. Yeah? So have and been are primary auxiliaries. They can stand on their own. So you can say Jack is the cheat. Yeah? Then cheat is then is a copular verb. You can say Jack has a bicycle. Then it becomes a lexical verb. Here it's their auxiliaries. So may is a modal auxiliary, have is a primary auxiliary, and been is a primary auxiliary. So the most important modal auxiliaries, or the most common ones, are may, can, could, will, would, shall, should, may, might, must. The most common modal auxiliaries they are. Can, could, will, would, shall, should, may, might, and must. You can teach those to your secondary school kids. Yeah? Can, could, will, would, shall, should, may, and might. And must. Yeah? There's lots of others as well that are coming in year 2, Fed Gamma 2, but not here yet. Just remember, if it's not primary, it's modal. Cheating is a lexical verb. You can describe what cheating is. You can describe it. Now, obviously, there's only one finite verb here. Because the first verb is always finite, all the rest are non-finite. So, that's easy, that's may. You can change the form of may, you can change it into might. Jack might have been cheating. Yeah, but that's not really important, so just remember the first one's always finite. Yusra.
So it doesn't matter in every sentence what the word is, the first word is always finite and the rest is none.
Yeah, if it's the first word or the only word, it's finite.
Okay.
Verb. So good of you to correct. Then have is infinitive. Yeah. It's a bare infinitive, doesn't have verb, but you don't need to specify that, but it's nice to know it's a bare infinitive. Yeah, David told you about bare infinitive, so that's good. Been is a past participle, it's a past tense form, and it appears in the third column of the irregular verbs. To be was were been. The cheating is a present participle because it ends in ing, or the ing participle. Yeah, so this is a lot to say about the predicates, but if you can do this, then you can understand the predicator. The last three things are what you what you will be asked on the test. So, what are the kinds of verbs, the form of the verb, and the non-finite form. So don't write anything down for non-finite form below may. May is finite, and therefore is not infinitive, past participle, present participle, because it's finite. Yeah? Infinitive, past participle, and present participle only describe non-finite verbs.
So we don't have to put the tense for the finite forms.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Question. If
Yeah.
there's a lexical verb,
Yeah.
you don't have to specify if it's transitive or intransitive?
Not in this course. In year 2 you may have to. Yeah. Any other questions?
The
If David says things which are different from what I say, because I hear some people say that, tell him after this class and we'll discuss it together, David. Yeah, you can. You can change the name to Jack might have been cheating, and that's why it's finite. Yeah? Sinem, you had a question as well? Okay. Any other questions about this? Is this clear? Most of this is just rote learning. Yeah? So make sure you revise this at home, and then you get more familiar with it in the course of the block. Okay, so far so good. This was the predicator. So we now know about lexical and copular verbs. We know about modal and primary auxiliaries. We know about finite and non-finite, and we know about infinitive, past participle, present participle forms. Yes, there's a lot of information to remember. But the good thing is with predicators, you can just find any English book or article or newspaper and just start analyzing predicators, and then you can describe them, whether they're describe the verbs, whether they're modal auxiliaries or primary auxiliaries, etc. Right. Let's turn to functions again. So we've talked about the subject and the predicator. The subject and the predicator. We said the subject is always the beginning of the sentence. It describes the who or what is the main topic of the sentence, who does the action, who experiences it, etc. The predicator describes the action itself, or the experience itself. So the subject tells you who or what the sentence is about. Jack feels rather full. Jack is the subject. He feels is the experience. Experience in this case is the predicator. Oh, just a reminder, what kind of verb is feel? Anyone?
Is copula.
A copula. It's not a lexical verb. It's an experience. Yeah? You can say Jack is rather full, even though that's not entirely the same. There may be room for more frogs. But he feels full. So it's an experience, a state. So this is a copula, a linking verb. Remember that.
He's happy. Happy's already.
Yeah. So when you're what I'm saying after this, it's important to know the difference between a lexical verb and a copular verb. If you don't understand that, then what I'm going to say next becomes very hard to understand. So a copular verb describes a state. When you look at a predicator, always ask yourself, is the main verb a lexical verb? Does it describe an action or a state? Can you more or less replace it with a form of be? And I say more or less because of course you can't replace every verb with be, but sometimes the meaning makes sense. You can say Jack is rather full. So this is a copula. We need to know this is a copula because that explains to us what the next element in the sentence is. If a sentence contains a copula, then the element, the constituent that follows the copula, or the predicator that contains the copula, that's a subject attribute. And an attribute is a description of something, eigenschap in Dutch. So this is an attribute of the subject. You can say Jack is rather full. Rather full, at that moment, is attribute of his. Subject attribute. Yes? So if you're looking at a sentence, analyzing a sentence, you found the predicator, and something follows the predicator, always ask the question, may this be a copula? Then the other constituent that follows must be a subject attribute. So I say a copula must always be followed by something. And another word for copula, remember, is a linking verb. So it must be followed by something. Otherwise, there's nothing to link it, the subject to. Otherwise, it wouldn't be called a linking verb. Here are two examples. The tiger seems hungry and the teacher was inspiring. See, that's what teachers do. When nobody tells you you're inspiring, you just put a sentence on the board to comfort yourself. You can replace. So these hungry and inspiring, they say something about the subject. They describe the subject. They're an attribute of the subject. How can I describe this tiger? This is a hungry tiger. How can I describe this teacher? It's an inspiring teacher. This is the subject attribute. And I said an attribute is a quality or a feature. And as you see here, you can you know this is a subject attribute because seems is a copula. How do I know? Because I can replace it with an equal sign. The tiger is hungry. Of course, isn't the same as seems, because he may only seem hungry but not be hungry. But it's more or less the same. It shows you this is a state. And the teacher was inspiring. Well, of course, you can replace that with an equal sign. Yeah?
So with the sentence we used, Jack may have been cheating, couldn't you also say that cheating is a state of Jack, so that being was a copula?
No, because it doesn't describe an experience he has. He's not in the state of cheating. Cheating is an action he performs.
But in that sentence there's no copula, so there's no subject attribute.
Yeah, well, he says B could be the copula and cheating the subject attribute.
Wait, in what sentence was it?
Jack may have been cheating.
May have been cheating.
Yeah, and Buck's question is, can you say Jack may have been is the predicator, been then is the copula, and cheating is the subject attribute. But that doesn't work because cheating describes the actual action that's taking place, and that must go in the predicator. Question here.
Is the subject attribute always the only thing followed? It follows a copula, or can more things follow?
You can have adverbials as well, which will come in 2 weeks' time. But not really anything else. No. Any other questions? Yes. Jack has been cheating. Question here. What happens when you say Jack has been cheating? Then cheating is a lexical verb, so there is no, there's only a subject and a predicator in that sentence. Yeah? Has and been. So let's look at that sentence. Jack may have been cheating, or Jack has been cheating. Doesn't matter. There's only a subject and a predicator here. Cheating is a lexical verb. It's a main verb. I hear a lot of background noise again. So there's no copula here, so we can't have a subject attribute. Does that make sense? Yeah? Sorry? There's no copula in this sentence. No, so we can't have a subject attribute. Yeah? And the question, another question was, could cheating be the subject attribute in this sentence? No, because cheating is the action that Jack performs. That's the main verb of the predicator, has.
So you can't have a subject attribute without a copula, and you can't have a copula without a subject.
Exactly. The copula and subject attribute
Belongs
have to come
together.
together. Tim, you had a question as well.
Yeah, are the subject attribute, is that linked to being an adjective phrase?
It's most of the time followed by an adjective phrase, but not always. Yeah? Good question. So here's the rule to follow. If there's a copula, there is the subject attribute. Remember this rule. If it's a copula, it's a subject attribute. There's a question in the back.
Yes. The sentence, the teacher was inspiring. So was is a copula, right? And
Was? Yeah.
inspiring subject attribute?
Yeah.
Okay, so that makes inspiring an auxiliary then, because you can either have a copula or a lexical in the sentence?
Inspiring is a subject attribute. And was is a copula. I can't hear the question. You're confusing several things here. Was is was can be a primary, can sometimes be a primary auxiliary, right? Because it's a form of be, and be, have, and do are primary auxiliaries. Why are they primary auxiliaries? Because they can occur on their own and then they change. Like be can occur on its own, and then it changes to a copular verb. Here, was occurs on its own, and it changes into a copular verb. It's not an auxiliary verb here. It's a copular verb. Because it links the teacher to inspiring. Inspiring is a subject attribute. It looks like a verb, but it doesn't belong to the predicator. Why? Because here, this is a state, and this is not an action. Inspiring describes the teacher. Yeah, you can attach a label to the teacher saying inspiring. This is not something he does, not his action. Yes.
So is it safe to say that in a sentence there can only be one copula and one lexical?
Yes, that was my rule from last week. Only one copula and only one lexical in a predicator.
In a predicator,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I find this also a bit confusing still, but if you would change the sentence to the teacher was inspiring us, everything changes, doesn't it?
The teacher was inspiring in it?
Us.
Yes.
And then everything changes around, so you need to know whether it's a transitive verb or not.
Exactly, and I'll explain that next week. I didn't want to go into transitive and intransitive because I thought I'd confuse you. Before we have a break, here are some examples of copulas. This maybe also explains your question in a minute. Yeah, this maybe also explains your question. These are examples of copulas. You can find more examples on page 12 and 13 in the reader. Some of these verbs can also appear as lexical verbs with a different meaning, and that's your question. For example, she sounded crazy. Sound is a copula. She sounded crazy. Yeah, you can replace it with a form of be. She is crazy, but it's not exactly the same, but it shows you this is a state. She sounded crazy. However, she sounded the bell. Then this is not a state, this is an action. It's a do verb, do sentence. Yeah, so then it's a lexical verb. Susan felt the texture of the fabric, or after a few minutes, John felt happy again. Susan felt the texture, then she's actually feeling. She's performing an action. After a few minutes, John felt happy again. He's not feeling anything, he's not performing an action, he's experiencing something. So you've got to distinguish between be sentences and do sentences, if you like. Action sentences and experience sentences. Yes?
In the second example, is happy the subject attribute or happy again subject attribute?
Happy. Again is something else. 2 weeks time. After 2 weeks. Yeah. Any questions about lexicals or copulas? So always, if you look at a predicator, ask yourself, does this sentence describe an action or a state? Does someone do something or does he experience something? If it's a state, then it's a copula. If it's an action, then it's a lexical verb. Why that's important will become clear after the break when I introduce you to a new function. Lucky you. 10 minutes.
Toch?
Precies. Staat hij al uit? Ja, maar
Oh shit.
hij kan op pauze.
Waar?
Gewoon stoppen.
Doe maar, anders hoor je ons rare vragen.
Kan je nog schrijven zijn?
Okay, if I can have your attention again, please, then I'd like to go to the next part. Okay, here we go. Let's practice the first four. This is a copula or a lexical verb with the first four sentences and underline the subject attributes. Give you a few minutes for this. See if you can do this on your own. So, do these sentences, the predicators in these sentences contain a lexical or a copula? And do they have subject attributes or not? Nikki feels ill. Feels is copula, a finite copula. And ill is the subject attribute, naturally. The plants grow fast. Grow here is a finite lexical verb. Grow can sometimes be a copula. He grows old, which means he becomes old. Then old describes a state. But here, growing is an action.
In the seventh sentence, is grows a copula?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. In sentence 7, was Gouda. I once taught private English lessons to a gardener, and he would say, when I was 12, I drink a little milk. Anyway. The plants grow fast. Sorry for distracting you. Grow is a lexical verb. Grow can also be a copula sometimes, as you can see in sentence 7. The sound grows louder. That's a different meaning of grow. You see that, huh? In 2, grow is an action. In 7, grow is an experience, a state really. You can replace, in 7, you can replace it with an equal sign. And in, you can say the sound is louder or becomes louder. In 2, the plants, you can't say the plants are fast, it's different. Someone can grow fast, it doesn't mean he is fast. Rob becomes embarrassed when people compliment him. This means Rob needs a psychiatrist. And becomes is a finite copula. Embarrassed then is the subject attribute. Yeah, because becomes is a state. James touched his forehead. The lexical verb finite again, because touch is an action. Any burning questions? From Darcy in the back.
So, sentence 2, fast, there's no subject attribute?
No.
Why?
Why? Because there's no copula. Fast is fast doesn't describe a state. Fast describes how fast, how fast. It's an adverbial that comes in 2 weeks' time. Another question from
Hamza. In 3, Complement is also a lexical, right?
Yes. Yeah. But that's the subclause. So it's not the main clause. Yeah. Kim?
Yeah, we're not going to do the other sentences, are we?
No.
Can you put the answers? So
Yes,
we
I
check?
can. Maybe you should, if you want to see these answers, because we really need to move on, copy them at home. Yeah, this is in the main PowerPoint on NatSchool. Kim?
Why is and N not part of the subject attribute?
Where?
N on submission.
Oh, that's a mistake. That should be included.
Okay, great.
And in 10 as well. Okay. Let's talk about the next function. Direct object for, this term I do know in Dutch. Many terms I don't know. Leidend voorwerp. James touched his forehead. We looked at that sentence. Now, touched, we said, is a lexical verb. It's not a copular. It's not a copular. So, it's not followed by a subject attribute, right? It's not a copular. However, it's still followed by something, namely the direct object. Many lexical verbs are followed by a direct object. Direct object. So if there's a lexical verb, you'll want to look out for a direct object. Not every lexical verb is followed by a direct object, by the way.
Because you can easily change this sentence to James touched.
Yeah, James touched. I wouldn't say that.
No, neither still.
But you can say James touched something and then
Something is the direct.
Something is the direct object.
But sometimes a lexical verb can occur on its own. I'll explain that to you next week. James touched his forehead. Touched is a lexical verb. In this case, touched requires an extra element, which then is a direct object. The direct object tells you who or what the action was done to. The receiver of the action. Thank you. Yeah, you should devise a dictionary. Yeah. The receiver of the action. What a beautiful term. So the forehead here is the receiver of the action, of the touching. I'm so touched by the term. Sorry, I'm carried away.
carry on.
Okay, so here's a formula that you can follow. If you're not sure whether something is a direct object, try out this formula. Subject plus predicate plus who or what. James touched who, or James touched what? Yeah, James is subject, predicate is touched, and then who or what. James touched who or what? He touched his forehead. His forehead then is the direct object. Subject plus predicate plus who or what. James touched what? His forehead. Yeah? Jack had eaten all the frogs in the pond. What had Jack eaten? All the frogs in the pond. Syntax is all about asking the right questions. I'll show you the last slide. What I mean by that. This doesn't work. This could work for copulars, for subject attributes, but for subject attributes, it's easy because if there's a copula, then there's always a subject attribute. Yeah? Which is not the case for lexical verbs and direct objects. Oh, sorry. So if you 1 minute to analyze these, or half a minute to analyze these sentences. Jack is fond of frogs, he eats them quite often. So, what are the functions of these elements? Analyzing. Right, let's look what the answers are. Can we quiet down again, please? First one contains the subject attribute. Jack is the subject, is as a predicate, fond of frogs is a subject attribute. You could analyze this in a different way as well.
Whoa! It's way too fast.
We'll just say fond of frogs is a subject attribute. Jack is a subject, is as a predicate, fond of frogs is a subject attribute. What was I going to say? Yeah, this is how you do it on the test.
So you don't go into predicate.
P is predicated. No, there's a separate question on the test.
This is function.
Yes.
I thought it was is fond of as that would be the predicate.
No, fond is not a verb. Yeah, fond is an adjective. Yeah. It is possible, though, to say that fond and of frogs are two different constituents. Yeah, that's possible. We'll leave that for now, because that's a different function. Right.
What function does quite often have?
Yes, I left that out, because that's an adverbial, and we'll talk about adverbials in 2 weeks' time. Everything in 2 weeks' time, because we'll have covered all functions in 2 weeks' time. Isn't that amazing? How much? A question from here in front. Can we quiet down again, please? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't say on the test how to analyze it, because I was starting with function, phrases.
Yeah, on the test, you don't write down the phrases unless you're asked to, and that's a separate question. There's an example test in the syllabus, a practice test, and that shows you what kind of questions you'll get in the test. Yeah. But the first 25 or 30 questions or so will be like no, not 30. 20 questions or so will be like this. You get a sentence and you just analyze them. S, P, S, E, S, P, D, O. Yeah, so is a copula, eat here is a lexical noun. Okay. Question.
I'm just wondering, what is quite often?
I just answered that question here. You probably didn't hear because it's a distance. Quite often is an adverbial, and we haven't discussed adverbials as yet. So I left that out because adverbials will come in 2 weeks' time. Yeah. If you really want to know, bijwoordelijke bepaling in Dutch. But not important. Another exercise. Do I want to do this exercise? Let me just see how far we are. Yeah, we have time for exercise. And now you've seen the answers already. Okay, we'll do these sentences. Let's say, oh yeah, we can do all of them. Underline the subject attributes and the direct objects. Yeah, so don't analyze the entire sentence. Just underline the subject attributes and the direct objects. We'll give you a few minutes for this. Good luck. So let me discuss this with you. The eldest son hates mock turtle soup. Mock turtle soup. Hates is the predicator. It's a lexical verb because hate is an action. What does he hate? He hates mock turtle soup. So mock turtle soup is a direct object. The examples given here is a subject, because you can replace that entire set of words with one word, this, or these, or they. The examples given here. This shows, or they show what? That constituents can be very long. Show is a lexical verb, so we have a direct object. What do they show? That constituents can be very long. Now, I said forget about for. Yeah, don't even write it down. It's I think it's me. It's a passive sentence. So as an act of rebellion here on my part, I refuse to discuss this. How good of me. In his speech of 1884, the then British Prime Minister Lord Rosebery, wow, this is a long constituent, but this entire thing is a subject. That's not true. The then British Prime Minister Lord Rosebery is a subject. In his speech of 1884 refers to time. So that's an adverbial, which I'll explain in another lesson. The then British Prime Minister Lord Rosebery is a subject. Because you can replace that by he. Yeah, so you can say then he discussed. So the first bit in his speech of 1884 can be replaced with then. So that's one constituent. And then the then British Prime Minister Lord Rosebery can be replaced with he. He discussed, and then what did he discuss? The British Empire. The lines moved a bit, so the should it belongs to the direct object as well. That probably answers your question in the back. Yes. The British Empire is a direct object. What did he discuss? The British Empire. Supporters of the use of modern English and church, again, a very long subject. They have many arguments. They replaces supporters of the use of modern English and church. And they have many arguments. This may sound difficult to you. How can you find out that how can you spot that this entire thing is a subject? 2 weeks ago we said if you want to know, you should start with the predicator. How can you find out what the predicator is? Change the tense of the sentence. Supporters of the use of modern English and church had many arguments. The word that changes belongs to the predicator. So have here changes if you change the tense, if you change the time of the sentence. If you make it past tense. Supporters of the use of modern English and church had many arguments. So have here is the predicator. Who have? Supporters of the use of modern English and church. Yeah? They have. That's the subject. Anyway, we're not talking about subjects, we're talking about direct objects and subject attributes, and many arguments here is the direct object. What do they have? Many arguments. And have is a lexical here. Last year's teachers' boycott of national curriculum testing, again a really long subject. This, you can replace it by this or it. It must have been. Yeah? It must have been. Must have been is the predicator. Been is a copula. It's the most successful piece of industrial action in years. Okay, that's a subject attribute. If you find it still really difficult, then leave your questions for now until the tutorial is daily. I'll be available for a few minutes after the lecture. Okay, so let's just wrap this up. By now you know that a sentence can be divided into different words, right? You know that. You can say this is a noun, a verb. This is how we started out. We said, how can we actually structure sentences? Well, we can just look at the individual words. That was my first lesson. We can look at the individual words and give them labels, word classes. And that's called parsing. That's called parsing. I can label each word in that sentence. That is demonstrative pronoun, is a verb, called is a verb as well, and parsing is a noun. The words can form groups, constituents. Yeah? And these constituents have a name, phrases, noun phrase, verb phrase. In order to know what the phrases are, you need to know what the word classes are. Because the most important word in a phrase determines what the name of the phrase is. But these constituents also have a function. And that's when subjects and predicators and all that stuff comes into place. The subject tells you what the topic of the sentence is. The predicator describes the action or experience of the subject. The subject attribute tells you what the subject experiences. So when there's a copula, it's an experience or a state. And it always follows a copula. The direct object tells you who or what the action was done to, or who was the receiver of the action. I'll let you give a copyright to that term. Yeah. It always follows a lexical verb. If there's no lexical verb, you can't